believe in the ripple effect.
What's up? Another episode of Ripple Effect Podcast. I'm your host, Hrvoje, also known as Ricky Brands, and a great episode for you today. We had an amazing chat with my friend, Hrvoje Morić, and he's a fascinating guy with an amazing life, and he's interviewed some amazing people on his show, Geopolitics and Empire, which is a podcast you can find just about anywhere you can find this podcast, and he also hosts a live show called TNT Radio. And I think after listening to this very fascinating discussion, you'll definitely want to check out both his shows. With that said, now I got to remind you, this is a value for value show. If you get some value out of this podcast or any of my conversations I'd share with you, please consider giving some value back. And that doesn't have to be financial. If you can't financially support the show, obviously prices for everything is ridiculously high. I'm dealing with it too. Believe me, money's very tight for myself also. So I definitely feel your pain. And that's why if you can't support the show financially, consider subscribing to the show on all the platforms I'm on. And there's plenty of them: BitChute, Odyssey, Rockfin, Rumble, and many more. And I'm also on just about all the audio platforms. So wherever you watch or listen to the Ripple Effect Podcast, please thumbs up if you can, subscribe, share, review, do all that stuff. And that helps fight against the algorithms that are definitely suppressing shows like mine. But if you're in a good financial situation and you can financially support the show, please consider doing it in one of the many ways I offer. You can give a one-time donation on PayPal. We have a Patreon page if you want to support us monthly. And if you do support me monthly on Patreon, once a month I do a Patreon podcast with my Patreon supporters, which is always fun. So for as little as $1 a month, you can participate in those Patreon podcasts. I also have an awesome merch store. And if you haven't been there recently, there's tons of new stuff, new logos, new t-shirts, new hoodies, new mugs, and much more. And the merch store company has recently expanded, so they get stuff out quicker. There's more variety, and they're constantly releasing new stuff. So please check out the rippleeffectpodcast.com, click on support, and find all these ways of supporting the show. A couple other ways is you can donate crypto, you can donate Ethereum or Bitcoin, and on my website you'll find those QR codes. You can also support the show by signing up for the University of Reason and the Autonomy course, which is Richard Grove's online courses. And if you're not familiar with the University of Reason, just go in the show description, click on the links, get a little more information, and see if it's something that you might be looking for, something you might be interested in. Another one of our sponsors is Element Electrolytes. So if you're looking to add a little flavor to your water, if you're sick of drinking water every day and you struggle to stay hydrated, consider checking out Element Electrolyte Mix. It's little packets you throw in your water. It's high quality sodium, potassium, and magnesium. And there's tons of amazing flavors. And if you use the link below in the show description or the link that's on my website, you can get a free gift, a free sampler of all their flavors. So please use that link. And every time you use that link, you support the show and you will get that free gift. And if you're fasting, if you're doing keto, carnivore, paleo, or you're an athlete and you want to stay hydrated, this is an awesome option. There's a lot of electrolyte drinks out there and packets, but most of them don't use high quality ingredients. Most of them are full of a bunch of artificial ingredients, flavors, sweeteners. But Element was designed by Rob Wolf, which many of you who have been in the health and nutrition world for a long time, like myself, has definitely run into his work and his research, his books, his documentaries, and he's been interviewed on all the major podcasts, and he understood a lot of symptoms we deal with muscle fatigue, soreness, headaches, low energy. A lot of that is due to dehydration. So hydrate yourself, add flavor to your water without worrying about kicking yourself out of fasting or kicking yourself out of ketosis. Or like I said, just check out Element if you're looking for a alternative to water that tastes good, is healthy, and it was formulated and created by a person that's very respected in the health and nutrition community. A couple other ways you can support the show is just by watching the Ripple Effect podcast on Rockfin. I don't know which platform you're watching it, but the cool thing about Rockfin is just by watching my videos on Rockfin, and it's a free video platform. There's some premium content, but all my Ripple Effect podcast episodes are free. You can watch them on there or use their app and support the show that way. I also have music. The Ripple Effect podcast theme song is by my solo project, Theory 6. You can find Theory 6 music anywhere you can get digital downloads. And if you like the theme song to this podcast, just look up the song, The Ripple Effect. The last thing is just to remind you that the Ripple Effect podcast does have a group chat for all the listeners. You'll find the link on my website or in the show description. You can use it to connect with other listeners of the show and with myself. That's it. Enjoy this amazing conversation. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace. What's up, my patient friend?
Hey, when you live in the developing world, you have to be patient.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
How's Friday treating you?
Crazy busy, but that's life. And I'm starting to have computer problems after you. It was really weird. For the first time I started up my PC and it's like, it said it's repairing the disk. Like, this never happened before.
Yeah, it was so weird. So I like to record right in the beginning. I'm sure you've listened to the show before, you know how I roll. And yeah, so for people listening, I was on your other show. Well, you're on my show, but you have two shows. So that's why I say your other show. I was exposed, and I want to get into the origin story, and I want to get your whole, the whole journey on what led you to where you are today, and whatever that entails, and get into as much of it as you would like. But I kept running into your work from Geopolitics and Empire podcast, which is a phenomenal podcast. And what I typically do, and I don't know if you do this too, but typically when I have a guest on, if it's somebody that I'm not super familiar with, or somebody that I just want to do a little extra research on their stuff, I'll just search for other interviews that they've done to kind of get a feel of like, okay, what type of person are they? What's their personality? What may be some good ideas for questions, so sometimes I'll listen to another interview and I'm like, oh, they should have asked this. And I'll be like, okay, let me remember that when I have them on. But typically I end up forgetting it and then getting mad at myself for still not asking the question that I think would be a good question. But I kept running into your show. We would have a lot of the same guests on. We would hit on a lot of similar topics. But now you also do the TNT radio show, which is a live show, which is real fun. I mean, live shows are a blast. I've been on AM Wake Up with Pasta and Steve. I've been on Quite Frankly, and a couple other live shows. I think I was on OBDM before we started the Union of the Unwanted. And there's something cool about live shows because you never know what's going to happen, and and you can get thrown curveballs like I threw you Wednesday when I was on your show. So what we were talking about was I was supposed to be on his show, and typically like I give myself enough buffer time to get everything set up, and if I've used the computer recently, I know everything's pretty much where it needs to be and everything is working. And I go to start my computer and literally nothing worked. First, it was a blank screen. I had to restart my computer. And then it kept crashing every time I try to open anything. It would just keep saying it's loading. Zoom wouldn't open. Pro Tools wouldn't open. Then I had to do, I don't know what you would call like a hard reset when you literally like hold the power button down. And I'm like, this isn't good, but I have no other way of turning off my computer. And so luckily since then I've had some luck, but I threw you a curveball because I was supposed to be on for an hour. And then I think by the time I got everything going, I didn't get it going. I ended up using my laptop. So I don't know how the audio quality was, but hopefully it was good enough. And, but that's one of the beautiful things about live shows. Anybody who's listening in live is like, what is going on, and and like what you might sound like there's shit going on in the background because there was, that's so. But enough of me talking. People want to hear the guests. So let's
Yeah.
some of your story. Let's hear your origin story, the origin story about geopolitics and empire, and the TNT radio show.
I was just gonna say the live thing is like we try to make it look like nothing is wrong. I mean, going, what happened with you, even worse stuff has happened before. And once you go through those experiences the first time, like it's really freaky. Like I'll tell you the truth. The first time I got hired to do TNT in March, and I've never done live before. I always do pre-recorded, right? Because I'm not really that well versed in doing all this live streaming stuff. It's a little bit beyond me. I like doing pre-recorded. And the first day I did my first live TNT broadcast, I got physically ill just from being so nervous. That night I got like a fever. Like a fever and just feeling ill. The next day, like I quickly recovered, but that's how nervous I was. But once you go through all of that, it's like a piece of cake. And I had my internet go out 15 minutes into interviewing a guest on TNT a while back. It went out for 3 hours. Never happened before. And so that had happened. And then I had to, the guest was great. He came back on again in the future. And then with you, it was like, I had to do a monologue for 20 minutes, like on the news, but then you just kind of get used to doing it. So and then we've got people at TNT that can jump in last minute. And so for the second segment, I had Jeremy Beck on, and then you came in. And so that's just the name of the game. It happens to me, the host, the guest, the network, whatever. So, and I would just add, you were on, you said Craig Jardula's, right? Live AM wake up from the Convo Couch. I had him on recently. His new name is Juralda, Pasta Juralda, because they misspelled his name at TNT. So he's no longer Jardula. On his episode, it says Juralda. But I do the same thing you do with guests. When I'm looking for guests, I first to see if they've done interviews before, because if I reach out to someone, I can't find any videos of them or audio. I don't know what they're going to sound like. Maybe they won't be good guest, so I kind of gauge them that way, and I see what are some of the things they've talked about. Maybe there are a few people that are a little way off, I don't know, and I decide not to invite them on. So I do the similar thing. But basically, origin story, G&E. You said my origin story or the podcast or what?
Well, both. I mean, I'm sure that they're both connected, right?
Well, I guess we're both similar in the sense you're like a Portuguese American, no?
Yeah, I was born in Portugal and then came here when I was young.
Yeah, I kind of did like a bit of the reverse. I'm a Croatian American, so I'm from Chicago, but then we moved back and forth to Croatia. So
you spent some time there, growing up there?
Yeah, like 5th grade and then high school and then every single summer. And so speak both languages and have both citizenships. And proudly, I identify more as Croatian because that's like your blood, your ethnicity, and so your culture.
Well,
so yeah.
I think America lacks a little bit of culture, and that's why people end up still connecting with the culture of their ancestors, because it's same thing with me. I consider myself a Portuguese, and I eat Portuguese food. I still speak Portuguese with my parents. I don't really speak any English. I live in a Portuguese community, so the butcher shops, the bakeries, everybody speaks Portuguese. We're very patriotic in regards to our football teams and our clubs and stuff like that. And Croatia has speaking of football, a very good national team and a lot of good players come out of there. But yeah, so I think, do you think that's one of the reasons is because they're just a lot like, what do you, if you're American, like, I guess being proud of your culture would be the equivalent of like being a Texan with a hee-haw, like Second Amendment, gun waving. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's be the closest. Like, if I think American culture, I kind of think that, right? I think like the more patriotic people, the people who wear the American flag, know the story of the founding fathers and take the Constitution very seriously. But outside of that, like music and other things, I mean, the food, like what's American food? I mean, I don't know. It's junk food, basically. There's no real McDonald's, I don't know, right? Hot dogs, hamburgers. I'm offending somebody, I'm sure.
I would agree with you, although over the years I've come to appreciate the American culture, and I do think there is this. You kind of outlined it, in the, I'm from Illinois or Texas, but there is this Americana, the history, the Constitution, the rights, even the American culture that's exported around the world. There's good parts and bad parts, and so I'm proud of the my American side as well, of my American and Croatian and Mexican as well. But yeah, what happened to me was in the 2000s, I went down the rabbit hole, right? It starts kind of like with InfoWars and Alex Jones, and then 9/11 was an inside job, and then Edward Griffin's Creature from Jekyll Island, about learning about the Fed and the fiat system and all of that. So it's like we've all gone pretty much, I think, down that rabbit hole. So that happened to me in like from 2000, the early 2000s, and then I just decided I wanted to leave America forever. I don't know what happened. I just wanted to permanently expatriate, and I did. My ticket out was Peace Corps Mongolia. So I in 2006. I went out to the Gobi Desert, but I was also trying to seek God. That's when I turned to Christianity. So I became that was my process of becoming a Christian. And so I felt in America at that time, well, now many people just want to get drunk, be promiscuous, do drugs, just watch like stupid movies, talk about the weather and sports. And for me, all of that was empty. Like, I want to find God and I want to get away from these temptations. So I'm like, what better way than to go to the Gobi Desert and live in the village of like 500 people, and outside of that there's like nothing, just nature, the brutal forces, freezing weather, like minus 30 degrees. So yeah, I did that, and then came back briefly to the States, and then studied in Geneva, the School of Diplomacy, and studied around a lot of fancy people. One of my professors, Alfred de Zayas, UN special reporter, Saddam Hussein's defense lawyer was my professor, Curtis Dobler, and people like that. And so, and then I got a job 2010 in Mexico. So came to Mexico, and you just never know how life is going to, which way they're going to take you. So I thought maybe come here for a year or two, 1 year becomes 10, marry a Mexican, buy a house, become a Mexican, naturalized. And I feel also Mexican, like in that sense, we're talking about Croatia, America. I really feel like when they gave me the citizenship at the government office, I'm like, I passed the history test, the Mexican history test. And I joked, I said, I passed the language test, the history test. I taught Mexican history. And it's like, I'm like, what about the last test? And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, where you put me in a room with a habanero chile and I have to eat it without breaking a sweat. And they were just laughing. And so, yeah, I take my Mexican citizenship serious, and so, anyways, yeah, when I started teaching here at the top globalist university here in Mexico, the MIT of Mexico, they're very much linked to, MIT in the US. They've had Bill Gates and Hillary Clinton speak at the online graduations here. They brought Al Gore down, and very globalist. And I taught here, and then I just I wanted something more for my students and for myself. So I started Skyping in smart people to my class, like in 2011, 12. Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, Ray McGovern, former CIA officer, James Bamford, Lord Monckton, even the father of the North American Union, Robert Pastor, Council on Foreign Relations. I did the last interview with him in 2013. He passed from cancer in January. He had visited our campus too, promoting the North American Union. So that's I called that dissident thinker. It's still up on YouTube. But then it was like 2015, 16. I'm like, I didn't even know what I was doing. I'm just doing these calls, recording them, throwing them up, bad quality audio. And so I'm like, I should do a proper podcast. And so like 2015, 16, Geopolitics and Empire was born. And then I just kind of moonlighted, working full time and trying to pop out a podcast once a week, like, record it, and then in the midnight hours, edit and upload. And it wasn't, 2017, I got offered a job to go to Kazakhstan, work for Nursultan Nazarbayev's intellectual school. And so I was there, and then the COVID-19 84 hits, and I'm like, we got to get back to Mexico. So, yeah.
So that's an interesting story. So you're a professor. Are you still teaching?
No. So when I was in Mexico, I taught high school, like secondary, economics, history, politics. and I was an adjunct professor of international relations at the university, because it's like one campus. This is school system. It's high school and university, both on one campus. And then I went off to Kazakhstan teaching the same stuff at the high school there. Yeah, and I forgot the other part. Yeah, but I'm not teaching anymore, because from 2017 to 2020, I was in Kazakhstan. And then from 2020 to last summer, I was teaching virtually from Mexico. So like Sunday evenings, Monday mornings in Kazakhstan. So I'd be teaching virtually to Kazakhstan. And ever since last summer, I've been without a job and trying to focus full time on geopolitics and empire, which is not easy. I think, trying to financially become sustainable with the empire deplatforming you and taking you off of Patreon and PayPal. It's like, what the heck, man? My own government won't allow me to do business. What is this? So.
Have you been kicked off Patreon and PayPal?
Yeah, so I did the first interview with Dr. Francis Boyle on the COVID subject in January of 2020. Even his book published last month, it's got the whole transcript of that interview. He talks about geopolitics and empire in his latest book. And that went viral, 300,000 views, my interview with him. And it would have had 1 million. I bet you $1 million it would have had 1 million views had YouTube not taken it off. And you know how that would have helped me grow. You get this cutting edge interview every out of the blue. This is what really helps you grow, right, as a podcaster. And imagine how many followers I would have had after that. But no, YouTube takes me down. And then it was I think it was 2021 where the Associated Press, and he talks about that in the book here too, that the Associated Press did a hit piece on him. And it was written with the Atlantic Council, right? NATO's think tank, that Associated Press hit piece, and then mentioned the interview I did with him. It said Geopolitics and Empire. And like a week later is when Patreon takes me down. They told me to delete a bunch of interviews that I've done from the entire internet. And if I don't, I'll be kicked off of Patreon. So I think it was in conjunction with the Atlantic Council and NATO and Associated Press. I mean, now big tech and the military industrial complex and media are totally one. And so that happened 2021. And then the same week, the DHS created the Disinformation Governance Board a month ago. That same time, Mint Press News, Consortium News, and myself, we got banned from PayPal. And they didn't give us a reason. They said, for this, there's a reason, we're banning you for life. And for this reason, you can't use it. And it's political persecution because they can't give you the reason. Because if they did, then they'd be like, oh, well, America's not a democracy because we're politically persecuting you. So
yeah, that viral moment, having a viral video would have helped a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people who end up blowing up is because of one little interview or one episode or something that ends up just picking up steam. And that was really early, because you're talking about January 2020. I mean, that's really early. Before I would have to go back in the archives. I know I felt like myself and a lot of people in my community were picking up on it early, but I don't think any of us were picking up that early. I think at that time we were still asking a lot of questions and uncertain on our perspective on the whole situation, or at least not certain enough to publicly be like, hey, I know for sure this is what's going on.
But even to give more context, after I did that, my face was on the front page of InfoWars, and Alex Jones actually took my interview, was showing it and he would interrupt it and dissect it. You can still find that in the archive. So that was funny to find my face on the front page of InfoWars. But then the following months, I was again, trailblazing, because that's what I like to do. I don't like to interview people who've done the podcast circuit, Peter McCullough is great, but he's done 5 million podcasts on everyone's podcast. And I think has he been on your show, Peter McCullough?
Yeah, he was actually, my show was actually one of the first shows he did the first time, because it was actually Dr. James Lyons Wheeler that was I think he was who suggested him to me. Same thing with Dr. Jessica Rose, Dr. Ely, Henry Ely, same thing. And you've had Dr. Jessica Rose on your show. Jessica was one of those people that I looked up interviews, and I'm like, when I had her on, she hasn't done any interviews, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't even know if I can riff with her.
Actually, I think I decided to get her after seeing her on your thing. So there you go.
And you're very similar with me in regards to style. Like I've had Dr. Peter McCullough on my show twice. I've had him on the Union of the Unwanted, I think once or twice. I've had him on a bunch of. It's like I did a 2 hour. I think it was a 2 hour conversation with Dr. Robert Malone. It's like, you know what, sometimes you're like, okay, well, there are things we can still talk about, there's current events and stuff like that, but when it's somebody who does so many interviews, it's like it's going to be hard to not repeat what they're saying. And sometimes, like, what you can do, you know, or what I tell myself what I should do is like, okay, if there's somebody that I still want on because I like them and I want to promote their work and I want to contribute to promoting their work, maybe what I'll do is maybe try to go at it from a different, you know, perspective, or ask some questions that they haven't been asked, or try to, because I this shows a lot more that's the thing about the Union of the Unwanted. I love the Union of the Unwanted. It has a huge fan base. People really enjoy that. By the way, you got to come on a future episode, hopefully. We're skipping the week of the 4th, but we're doing one, I believe it ends up being the 11th. So if interested, I know it might collide with your TNT show. So I don't know if that's even possible now that I'm thinking about it, because that's why quite frankly he hasn't been on either. We've been trying to get Frank on a few times and it just always collides with him. Same thing with Jimmy Dore. We wanted Jimmy Dore on the last one, but he couldn't come on because he was going live at the same time. So it's kind of a popular time. But I love the one-on-one conversations, like when I had Dr. Robert Malone on, or the first time I had Mickey Willis on from the Plandemic documentary. It gave me time to kind of like, you break the ice, you kind of, you know, start off talking about certain things, and then you can kind of go down other rabbit holes, or they bring something up that it's like, okay, they haven't talked about this, let me ask this question, or let me shine some light on this part of the story that hasn't had a lot of light shined on, or let me get maybe into a more personal conversation where we talk about a more of a personal experiences and upbringings and philosophy. So that's kind of the nice thing about the one-on-one conversation. You have time to kind of, you know, peel back the layers and get into some things that you can't get into on a big Zoom conference call like the Union of the Unwanted. And a lot of times, I don't know if you notice this with your show, but sometimes some of the best parts of the conversation are the very end, right? It's like, you know, something gets brought up at the very end that sparks a story, and it's like that you only could have got that story out if you talked about this, which led you to talking this, which led you to talking this, and now, you know, it reminded them of this story that they're sharing. And it's like, you know, sometimes I like cross my fingers, I'm like, I hope people get to the very end of that conversation, because there's some really great parts at the very end.
Yeah, like you mentioned Jessica Rose, like just another example. She's this scientist. She's investigating the vaccine stuff, and you'll hear her on other programs, and they're talking about the vaccines and the VAERS and all this statistical data. And I'm like, okay, that's great. We talked about that, but then I wanted to get it. The thing that's freaking me out the most is the social credit system, the digital ID, cashless system, which for me, I just interviewed Pastor and Dr. Chuck Baldwin. I agree with him that the COVID narrative is analogous to the beast of the book of Revelation. I think this system is what prophecy talks about, where it's going to be a cashless digital system where you can't buy or sell unless you submit to it philosophically, spiritually, ideologically. And anyways, I was asking Dr. Rose, like, you know, what are your thoughts on the vaccine passports, which is basically the digital ID, which is basically the social credit system. And then, like you said, she went off on that tangent where I think in my interview she talked about that, or maybe she hasn't in other interviews. And she's like, this is it. Like, if we don't push back against this now, this is it. And I agree with her. Like, if this system's installed, I mean, whether you believe in Bible prophecy or not, either way, it's going to be we're totally screwed. It's like Aldous Huxley's Final Revolution, right? Where you can't, once this is installed, you can't fight back against this scientific dictatorship. And yeah, and just going back, like, I think, was it 2020? I asked CJ Hopkins to come on, and he told me, like, mine was the first video interview that he's done. And then I interviewed Robin Monotti, the Italian producer, architect, because I just found his Twitter account, which was big, and he was doing great commentary on it. I'm like, I want to interview this guy. And then he got deplatformed from Twitter. And then I think I did like the first interview with him. And then he's got a big Telegram channel now, like 100,000 on Telegram. But then Eric Clapton stumbled onto Robin's Telegram, I think, and that's how Eric Clapton went down the COVID rabbit hole. And then they met. Eventually, there was an interview with Robin Minotti and with Eric Clapton. So I mean, like I'm trying to, and then a lot of people know, I think Pierce Robinson out in the UK. The interview I did with him in early 2020. I mean, we were talking about how COVID is like the new 9/11, and the British newspaper Times, the oldest, I think, British newspaper, they, right after my interview with him, they did a hit piece on Pierce and using a screenshot of my interview with him. So I'm getting all these people into trouble, Francis Boyle and Pierce Robinson. And I think there was even a hit piece on Robin Minotti where they were citing my interview with him, calling him like a conspiracy theorist. So, I mean, it's fun times doing all of this, but yeah, I think you and I are both alike where we're trying to go at it in a more unique and original way.
Yeah, and even finding guests, I'm like you. Like I'll screenshot so many people. I'm like, I got to go back to this. I got to go back to this because somebody will bring something up, and either on a show they're like, oh, you got to read this book, blah blah blah, and I'm like, okay, let me look it up. I'm like, that sounds interesting. Let me look it up. Then I screenshot the book, and I'm like, I got to go back, figure out who the author is, make sure he's still alive, and try to contact him because he sounds interesting. And one person that's kind of like that we both interviewed that I think before. I don't know whose show he did first, but I know we were definitely two of the first shows that had him on was Alex Craner. He's another one who, before he was on our shows, like I didn't know too many people who interviewed him. And then after being, I think it was, I can't recall. I don't remember if it was before, but either way, it was like, I remember we were interviewing him around the same time and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, he picked up on this guy too, like this gem of knowledge and just a really interesting thinker. And I remember thinking like, I hope more people pick up on this guy. And then when I had him on the Union of Unwanted, and that's kind of the nice thing about the Union of Unwanted is that it's a great networking tool. It's like, okay, like let's bring somebody into the community, they connect with other people, and they make friends. They end up doing swap casts or being interviewed on each other's shows and exposing audiences to new work and new audiences. So it's to me, like that's kind of the best part of that show because there are so many really, like, same thing with Massimo, who did 9/11 or what is it called, like the full title is like 9/11 A New Pearl Harbor, and
the documentary,
the documentary, the Italian guy. Yeah, he also did cancer cures. He did.
I've got one of his DVDs.
Yeah,
Massimo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's awesome. And I remember I had him on years ago, and I mean, he didn't do any, I didn't know anybody who's done any interviews with him. And I remember I had him on years ago. We talked about the cancer cures documentary. We talked about a bunch of different stuff. And then one Union with Unwanted, I was thinking like, dude, who could I call that's like kind of unique and have on that would be fun and hasn't been on the show yet. And so I had him on. And he came on, and then like next thing you know, he's doing a bunch of interviews. And then I remember Monica Perez, who's a regular on the Union of Unwanted. She's like, I love Massimo. She's like, I like we sat around, me and my friends sat around and watched American Moon about the moon landing. She was like a huge fan. So she was stunned that he was on the show. So it's cool to have like those people on that haven't done a lot of interviews, like you said. Maybe people are even familiar with their work but don't know who did it, because Massimo is one of those guys that like most people, if you're going down rabbit holes on cancer or 9/11 or moon landing, you probably run into some of his work and you didn't even know it. So it's cool to kind of have those people on. And I see the same thing with your show. Like a lot of times I don't know who the guest is, which makes me even more intrigued with it. I'm like, oh, this isn't somebody it's funny because it's like sometimes you're like, okay, if I don't know who the guest is, maybe I'll wait on this one, because I'm like, I'll come back to it. And then other times I'm like, I don't know who the guest is, but if he's on your show, he has to be somewhat interesting. So let me, I might be exposed to somebody new that I haven't looked into yet. So that's fun too.
Yeah, the cool thing, just going back, like Alex Craner, I mean, it was really cool because I'd seen them on Renegade Inc., which is a great program, doing great. And so I'm like, that's why I figured. And then I think I don't recall if I at that time I knew that he had a background similar to mine. So he's of Croatian extraction as well. And the funniest thing, when I talked to him the first time, he had lived in Venezuela like in the 90s, and so he speaks Spanish. It's like, how funny that he's a Croatian, I'm a Croatian. He speaks Spanish. He's out in Monaco now, and so we had so much in common. If they don't announce a new monkeypox, polio, cholera lockdown today, I'm hoping to go on a European trip and maybe drink a coffee with Alex or something on the Adriatic. But I mean, it's crazy. Like I was reading yesterday, Puebla, a state in Mexico, they're gonna, the crazy governor is talking about launching a COVID restrictions again. That supposedly yesterday he was supposed to, or today, make a decree for new restrictions again. Like, are we? And it's the same day today that Tedros and WHO is supposed to declare, DEFCON 5 maybe for monkeypox. I'm like, are you people serious? And so, anyways, but yeah, yeah, that's what's going on.
How do you run in? So you saw Alex Trainer on the Renegade Inc. I remember that show. That was on RT, right? And which I don't know if you can find it anymore because they kind of banned RT from everywhere. Even Fault Lines, he would be on Fault Lines from time to time too. Fault Lines Radio. And actually, I just found out Fault Lines is still on, but you can find it live on Rumble because it used to be on YouTube. They kicked him off YouTube. And I believe even the Sputnik app or RSS feed or whatever you call it that was on my Podcast Addict app, I wasn't working anymore, and then I ended up finding them on Rumble, so they're still around, and it's important to get like that other perspective. That's the thing that's bothersome. It's like there's two sides to every story, right? I mean, you can watch every World War II documentary and see it from like the Allies perspective, and then you can read and watch Hellstorm, which is from the Germans perspective, and it's not that I agree or disagree with any perspective. It's just like there are always other sides to the story, and the good guys aren't always the good guys, and the bad guys aren't always the bad guys. And so it's important to, even in times like this, to listen to people. Like when I had last time I had Alex Trainer on, that's exactly what we talked about. He knew quite a bit about the history of the Soviet Union and all that stuff, and we went deep into that whole topic and just kind of giving people a background on this whole conflict and why I think Russia's handling it so well, and the reason why we're the ones with all the financial issues and economic issues, and not the Russians, because they've been preparing this for this forever, and they've been warning us of this forever. So I'm sure they already knew, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is how we're going to handle it. This is how we're going to get through it. And so, and that's the thing. Like, people think this was like a over the night, spontaneous, impulsive decision to invade Ukraine. It's like, no, that's not the story at all. And that's why it was important for to have Alex on, and I believe I've had some other shows where we went into that whole history. And I haven't talked to McGovern in a long time, but I know he worked for the CIA, knows his Russian history, and also very knowledgeable in regards to that topic, and has always been a person who does interviews, who kind of cheers the Russian perspective, because it's really easy to simplify things and be like, Russia bad, US good, and it's like, oh, the poor Ukraine people, which is true, because like any country that's in a war, it's never good for the citizens who are just bystanders, innocent bystanders, and pawns in a global game. But it doesn't mean that there's not blame to go around for many different parties.
Yeah, I just before connecting with you, I interviewed, I don't know if you know Tim Kirby. He's got a channel. He's out in Moscow in Russia. He's an American, but he's got like Polish, Russian background, so he lives in Russia. So we're talking about this, and yeah, Ray McGovern, I had emailed him, I think over the years. I've interviewed him twice, like way back in the day, like in the 2010s, and then and then I had emailed him, and he's like, to set up an interview, but then this happens sometimes, like he doesn't follow through with the follow through. I don't know what happens, and then he had like a heart attack. So I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna, and then he's doing interviews again. So this just sometimes happens with guests, even guests that I've had on previously. They just kind of, the email farts out, and I'm like, I'm the kind of person, I don't like to pester people, so it's like, maybe I'll try again at another time or whatever. And as you said, there's a long list of people that we can be interviewing. So I just keep going, and I'll come back again. And yeah, regarding history, you have to look at all sides, you know, the Soviet, the German, the American, and then you kind of piece together what you think is the real narrative. I actually made there are many times, like in my teaching career, I made students, parents, I made students cry. You know, I had a Jewish Mexican student, and I thought, you know, I believe in the state of Israel. And myself as a Christian, I don't really get into this stuff because beyond, you know, I also believe the Palestinians are not being treated well. And, you know, if Israel is so wealthy, you know, why wouldn't you let Palestinians become citizens? Or why are you smashing their homes? Like, there's Palestinian Christians and like this stuff, what is going on. But, you know, for me, it's like, I'm just observing. I don't want to say anything. I don't know what's going on. That's up to them and God. And it's not my thing. Like, I'm staying out of it. So I don't have a strong opinion there, but I did want to show there's a great documentary called, I think it was called Occupation 101. So in my classes on history, I'd show the Israel perspective, and then let's look at the Palestinian perspective. And I would show a segment of Occupation 101, which shows how Palestinians are being mistreated. And this Jewish student started crying in the classroom, high school, crying, tears. And then they sent their mother, the parent or something, to the principal. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm just showing both perspectives. Like, you literally can't handle the other. And then I had American students. You know, I was talking about how the government killed Martin Luther King, and I showed the 1999 court case, 1,000-page verdict. Coretta Scott King and the whole King family said, yeah, the government killed him. And this student, like, where's the proof of this? I'm like, look here, I'm projecting on the screen the 1,000-page transcript. It's right in front of your face, the proof, but they don't want to believe it. They called me conspiracy theorist, anti-American. I'm like, what's the matter with you people? And so, yeah, anyways, yeah, that's just history. Yeah, that's just, and I think it's the patriotic thing to do is accept this corruption and then try to do something about it. And I think it's the anti-Americans are the ones who just accept the official narrative, you know. So anyways, yeah.
Well, it's funny because I was kind of joking around and sarcastically making fun of like super patriotic, nationalistic type of people. But it's funny because during this whole lockdown, I think I've said this on the show before, I've kind of changed my perspective on things. You know, I can kind of see the necessity for those type of people and the importance of those type of people, because as a you know, foreigner who came to America, I never really felt American. I never really cared to like embrace the American culture too much, you know, and you know, even joke around about if there even is a culture. But then during the lockdown, you see these people who truly believe that America was created to fight back. You know, it was kind of like a pushback against imperialism or empire or monarchies. It was like, we're going to create the first country where we create a system that keeps things fair and keeps corruption in control as much as possible, and really cares about people's rights and freedoms, and you know, the Constitution and the Second Amendment. Like, even the Second Amendment, you know, it's about protecting yourself against a possible corrupt government. And so all these things that I thought, you know, were kind of like, oh, that's kind of silly and that's a little, you know, over the top, and like, you shouldn't be that patriotic because it can blind you from what's really going on in the world, or what I would the way I would look at it sometimes. And I think this is what kind of influenced my thinking on nationalism and being super patriotic, is that when I first got into, you know, 9/11 and foreign policies and history, you really learn a lot about how every war is a unjust war, and they're all basically sold as this or that, but the truth is always something much worse and much more corrupt, and much more about filling the pockets of bankers or oil companies or private contractors or politicians, or it's about geopolitics. It's about controlling territories and influencing territories. You know, you go down the World War I rabbit hole, and I forget, there's such a good, I think it's Promises Promises and Betrayals, or Betrayals and Promises. It's an old documentary that one of the first ones I saw that really told the story very well about how the ally, or the West, got everybody to kind of fight among themselves, and how they got the Ottoman Empire to fall, and in that whole story. And so you're like, this is what happens when you're super patriotic. You're the English, or you're the French, or you're whoever, and you think you can never do any wrong, and you buy into the bullshit that you're sent overseas to fight for freedom, or to fight against communism, or fight against whatever. And you buy into that stuff because of how patriotic and nationalistic you are. And so I always looked at it as like, there's a band from UK called Enter Shikari, and I had the singer Rao Reynolds on the show once, and he has a song where he says like "fuck your borders, fuck your boundaries" or something like that. And I'm like, yeah, right, because who cares about lines on a map? Who, like, all we're doing is like creating this nationalistic perspective where it's like, I'm better than you, or I don't like you because you're not on this side of the line. And it's like, it seems silly. And then COVID happened, and you're like, oh my God, like, we seem like the US, because of the Constitution, because of the founding fathers, because of not so much specifically what's in there, because a lot of those things are debated, but the spirit that comes with it, right? Like, it's the spirit, the American spirit of do you have a what?
This is real book. Yeah. Bill of Rights.
Yeah, the Bill of Rights. But it's that spirit of like, these things are important, and this belief that this country was founded on religious freedoms, on the freedom to have a gun and protect yourself and protect your family, like all these things that are important. And it's like, okay, like I get why it's important. I almost feel like these other, and then even like having states, right? Like there's some I haven't kept up with it because I've been busy today, but the abortion conversation, right? Like all of a sudden, people are mad because the federal government's getting involved or whatever, and it's like, well, I can kind of see why you would want states to have the right to do their own thing, right? And during the COVID lockdowns, it was a perfect example of how that's actually like a better system, because in Canada or Portugal or whatever, like when your government says stay at home, I can't be like, well, I don't agree with what you're telling me to do, so I'm going to move on to the next state, because it's like the whole country has to follow those rules. Where in America, it's like, well, you know what? I don't agree with what Massachusetts is doing. I'm going to fly down to Florida, or I'm going to go to Texas, and I'm going to move there. And that's kind of, it keeps things in check. It's almost like the free market keeping things in check. It's like this idea of, if you run a shitty business and I don't like the way you run your business, I can go to this business, and then more people will go to this business, which will either force the other business to change their ways, or they just go out of business. And it's same thing with these states. It's like, okay, if you like these policies, you can deal with it. You can live. I have the freedom to go to this other state, and if I'm right, if I don't like the way you're running things and I think it's bad, then people are going to follow me, and more people are going to go to this state. Like Florida, I mean, just they're booming like crazy, and now they're getting, all the business owners are going down there, all this money's going down there, and these other states are struggling, the New Yorks, the Californias. So it's kind of like the free market, so it's just, it's in theory, it seems like a really good system, especially compared to most of these countries where you don't have that ability to go like, oh, let me just go to this other state that has completely different rules than the state I live in. It's not, you don't have those drastic things. And that's why people who are historians of America, they talk about how, the way they wanted to build this country is they wanted the states to have more freedoms and more control than the federal government. They didn't want the federal government to be able to get involved in each specific state and control them. They wanted states to almost be like little individual countries, which seems to, during COVID, it seemed to make sense, and it gave us at least a option. It wasn't easy for everybody to just get up and move, but at least you had that option where I'm like, okay, I can get out of here and go to Florida where people are actually living.
Yeah, I mean, but I think you can have the healthy, good patriotism while dissenting. Like, who was it? George Washington that said it's patriotic to dissent. So I mean, you can kind of have both, and I would agree that this constitutional system, which is not just in the U.S. I mean, you know, when we had the French and the American Revolution, a lot of these, you know, then these constitutions were created, these constitutional republics. The rest of the Americas copied that. Like literally, in many of the Americas, they copied the U.S. Constitution. You know, with differences, variations. But so we've got the Mexican Constitution, and there are examples how, as bad as all of these things have been shredded, there's still like this core that's hanging on of the Constitution. And that's not to say that maybe they will destroy the Constitution and we will end up in a dictatorship, possibly in the future, but it's been hanging on for quite a while. And even here in Mexico, like they attempted in some states, the vaccine passports, making them mandatory, and then completely unconstitutional. But then there were lawyers that got injunctions for hundreds of people, and using the Constitution, they were able to defeat some of these vaccine certificate mandates here in Mexico. And then the government tried to pass this crazy Great Reset like surveillance law, where you would have to register your cell phone's SIM, like all of your biometric data, your home address, everything. And that was struck down by a court like just a few months ago. So there are still these examples of how the constitutions are still functioning. But now, like the state governor where I am in Mexico, like it's illegal to do vaccine passports. But this was like during the pandemic, they were talking about changing the state's constitution here in Mexico to make vaccine certificates obligatory, to make it legal, to make vaccine passports legal. So they're talking about now changing the constitution. So anyways, yeah. And speaking about interviewing musicians, I've tried a few times. Like I had 5 times August, Brad Skistemas, on my podcast. He's great. I think a lot of people know his music, but you should probably try to get them. They didn't respond to me. Cog out in Australia. I actually think the drummer is probably of Croatian extraction because his last name is Morić, like the Marxist Croatian Chilean president of Chile, Morić. But they have good music that talks about conspiracy stuff. So they'd be good if you can get them.
How do you spell that?
C-O-G, Cog.
C-O-G.
They've got a great song called Are You Interested, which is all this conspiracy stuff. And they actually had an album or a song from like 10, 15 years ago called New Normal. So I don't know if they like predicted it, but yeah.
That's funny. So you speak Spanish? Fala poquito?
Más o menos.
Portuguese people say that a lot too. Anytime somebody's like, "Como estás?" Mais ou menos. It's funny. I have an easier time understanding Spanish from Guatemala or Mexico or even El Salvador than I do some of the than Brazilian. I've met some Brazilians that I'm like, well, I don't know what you're speaking, but that is not Portuguese. But it's one of those things where they end up having their own slang, and Brazil's a very big country, so different parts of Brazil will have different dialect, no different than like America. You go to the South, they speak slightly different than somebody from Boston. It sounds, from somebody who can't pick up on the accents, it almost sounds like a different language. Or you meet somebody who's like right off the boat Irish, it's like, oh, okay, that's a little harder to pick up on. But the way I compare it though is like, for me, Mexican Spanish is like American English. Like I've lived abroad in foreign countries like, for example, Kazakhstan, and we had English speakers from New Zealand, Australia, Scotland, and like myself, American, and all of these foreigners Kazakhs who spoke English, they're like, well, I don't understand the New Zealand guy or Australian, but I can understand the American English. And so for me, it's like the Mexican Spanish is the more easier to understand than the Spanish or some South American countries. I have trouble with that too. So like, yeah, the Mexican Spanish is the easier to understand. And it's just funny. Like I remember once I had mailed the Croatian embassy in Mexico in Croatian. I emailed them. I needed to renew my Croatian passport.
and they respond to me like in English and Spanish, like, I only speak English or Castellano, not even like Spanish, like, that's like the Spanish, I don't know, Castellano. Like, you're the Croatian embassy. What is this? So it's like an honorary embassy, honorary consul. I'm like, you don't even speak Croatian. What is this? Anyways,
funny. That is hilarious. Yeah, it's actually I gotta renew my passport too, my Portuguese passport sometime soon. But I haven't because I'm like, I don't think I'm leaving the country anytime soon. So it's like I have friends of mine who just came back from Portugal and they're still asking everybody for a vaccine.
Seriously?
Yeah, they're still everybody's still wearing masks. I'm like, I don't. The only perspective I get from Portugal is I watch soccer, football, and when I'm watching soccer, nobody's wearing a mask. And everybody's cluttered together in these stadiums, and you have the ultras going crazy, starting fires. I'm like, seems pretty normal, but apparently outside of that, it's like people are still, especially the older population, they're still like freaked out. Portugal's a very neutral country. They seem like, if the government tells them jump, they say how high, which is it's almost like it's a very our culture and personality. We're not very political. We like to eat and drink and dance and kind of live in the moment, but it's not that long ago, that Salazar was a dictator there, and you figure like, hey, we have parents and grandparents that either lived through it or heard stories about it. You figure you'd be a little bit more wary of maybe going down that path again, which was always amazing. Like, speaking of great guests that haven't done a lot of interviews, so this guy Michael from Ancient Greece Revisited, and he also, I don't know why I struggle to get that out, and then also the On Tyranny podcast, and amazing guy. He's from Greece, lives in Greece. He has a YouTube channel called Ancient Greece Revisited, and a really, really good YouTube channel. But then during the COVID lockdown, he started a podcast called On Tyranny, which is named after the Leo Strauss book On Tyranny. And really interesting guy. And he's another guy, hasn't done a lot of interviews, very, very fascinating. I'm just throwing it out there. Maybe hit him up. I'll send you his contact information. He seems like somebody right down your alley. And he was on my show, kind of unknown. I think his popularity for interviews have gone up a little bit because he eventually ended up being on the Unregistered podcast with Thaddeus Russell, and he's also done some interviews with Michael Millerman, who's another guy who's incredibly fascinating. And I'm very intrigued with philosopher Alexander Dugin. He's a very interesting guy. And Michael Millerman, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a very another.
Recently, I heard about him.
Yeah,
and Dugin is kind of weird. Like, I saw him on a smaller publication, Countere, and I've interviewed Zach, who works at Countere. It's like this kind of alt media. It's pretty cool, dissident magazine. So Dugin did an interview with them, and then I sent an email to Dugin, didn't get a response, and then I see him, like, I don't know how these people decide on, like, just randomly. Maybe they're just so busy, and then. But yeah, Dugin is fascinating. I haven't really read his books. I'm gonna have to do a deep dive on Dugin. You haven't interviewed him?
I have not. I've thought about reaching out. Well, the thing is, I'm like, am I really trying to get deported here? It's like I'm like, maybe I should wait till Putin, till we're buying oil from Russia again, because it's like he's considered Putin's brain. It's like a term, a kind of a nickname that people give him because he's very influential to Putin and their policies, and he's close with the leaders of Russia. But he got banned off YouTube, which is hilarious to me. Like, I keep saying this because it's so fascinating to me that somebody who won. If you're not used to listening to broken English, which I am, I grew up with, like, everybody around me speaks broken English. Like, some people might even struggle to understand what he's saying, and yet you ban him from YouTube when all he's doing is sharing ideas. Like, he's, to me, very, like, no philosopher should ever be banned off anything. Like, if all you're doing is discussing ideas and philosophies and other philosophers and other ideas, like. And to me, that's not like that tells you something, and that's because ideas are much more dangerous than anything. The last thing they want is ideas to spread that make you rethink what you thought you knew. And so it's but he's Michael Millerman he's from Eastern Europe. His family's from Eastern Europe, but I don't know if he moved to Canada when he was young or he was born in Canada, but he lives in Canada now, is a professor, and he was really intrigued with Alexander Dugin and ends up being one of the first people to translate his books and this whole theory called the fourth economic theory. And
political theory, I think.
Fourth political theory, you're right. Yeah. And yeah, I was confusing that with Klaus Schwab's what is this?
Fourth industrial revolution, right?
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. And but he ends up getting in trouble for translating his books and ends up having to leave his job at the university as a professor, and all because he was just he found this guy fascinating. And the crazy thing is, like, if you look into his philosophies, they're not just intriguing. They make they spark so much thought, and they're so thought-provoking, and it's such a different perspective on things. I even bounced off actually Monica Perez last time she was on the show, and I think Michael Millerman when I talked to him about this, like this idea that it's making me rethink our geopolitical reasoning for why we dislike the Soviets and why we have for so long. And diving into Alexander Dugin and the Soviet perspective, it seems like they are the same way that, like, our Constitution is a threat to imperialism and is a threat to global control. The Russians' perspective and philosophy and that culture, that spirit, seems to be a threat to modernity and a threat to progressive thinking and Western thinking that seems to be plaguing so much of the world with all this like gender nonsense and this like
globalism, basically.
Oh yeah, globalism. It's like confused the shit out of everybody so much that we decided we just rather live in robots, or machines, or which seems to be that seems to be the end game. And like everything, when you're taking these little baby steps, it's hard to see where those baby steps are going to eventually take you. Like when the COVID lockdown happened and the news just popped up and it seems like, oh, it's just 2 weeks to flatten the curve, that's all. It's like, no, it's about a vaccine. It's about depopulation. It's about no. I don't see that. They're just, the news is saying there's a virus, hospitals are going to fill up. Oh, that's all it is. So it's like, it's a baby step, and it seems very tolerable, and it seems very easy to accept, and it seems very difficult to see the big picture because it just seems like a little baby step, and then that baby step turns into another one. And that's the same thing with the transhumanism. It's like it's hard for some people to grasp it because we're still a ways away from it, and until we get closer to it is when people are going to start pumping the brakes, just like the COVID thing, where it's like when they're telling you that your 5-year-old can get a experimental vaccine for a common cold that's not harmful to them. It's like, okay, now the agenda seems clear, but all the whole other all those other little baby steps in this direction, you were denying that this was the agenda. Now it's undeniable. And I hope that's not the case with all these other things, that people are opening their minds to the idea that, like they're, climate change and all these other hot topic issues isn't about actually helping anybody except themselves.
Yeah, I have a feeling the whole LGBT thing is the step to transgender, which is the step to transhumanism. People have floated theories that make sense logically, like Catherine Austin Fitz, I think, was talking about how, if you think about it, employees today are either male or female in the legal system. If they're going to bring in robots in the future, in the legal sense of a company to employ a robot instead of a human being, anymore, the robot doesn't have a gender. So legally, you're going to kind of need to have a legal kind of construct for an employee that's not male or female, trans. That's kind of actually makes sense. How they're putting, like, now instead of male or female on your passport or identity, it's X or whatever. So that kind of brings in this whole the transgender paves way for the transhuman robotic thing. And yeah, Russia, I think, I think we're close to world government, and the West is leading the way. Great Reset, the American Empire, the Bretton Woods system, IMF, World Bank, and then there are just these pockets of the world like Russia or China, these civilizational states that still have conservative traditional culture, and this globalist one world government culture. Like we all know about the political global government system, the economic, one world currency, world reserve, all of that, but not enough people focus on the social and cultural aspect, right? Where it's kind of like one part of it is the globalization, where you got McDonald's, the McDonald'sization of the world, Starbucks. You go to Kazakhstan, there's a Starbucks. You go to Croatia, there's a Starbucks. You go wherever you want. That's part of that one world government, is having a, exporting Netflix and YouTube and Google. I mean, you go to, like, when I was living in Kazakhstan, all those young kids were consuming this Hollywood American stuff. They were becoming Americanized, but it's not really Americanization anymore. It's like globalism, these culture and values. I mean, there was a kid in Kazakhstan during the pandemic, a boy who started wearing a female skirt to school, and the Kazakh teachers said, like, what are you doing? Like, a very conservative culture. That kid ended up jumping off of ninth floor apartment building in Kazakhstan, killing himself. Where did that come from? That idea is coming. That's that globalist ideology that's spreading out there. And yeah, Russia is one of those things that the globalists have to smash because of that conservative culture. And it's the obstacle. As you said, I think that's part of the reason why they're going there. And I just when you're talking about Dugin and this professor in Canada, what happened with me with PayPal was that moment where, like, okay, yeah, I mean, I know I talk about this a lot, but it's not so much that I really care personally for myself. Like, okay, what I always say, I don't care if they deplatform me. I'll go sell tacos in here in Mexico. Really, I don't care. Like, I don't care. I'll just go live in the woods. I would be happy to do that. But the fact that, like, a month ago, I'm just an American dude doing a little podcast, and that they would see me that much of a threat to turn off my PayPal. Like, for me, that moment was like, are you guys serious? Like, to have my own government ban me from PayPal, that's, like, for me, wow. Like, I can't believe you guys. Like, it's like, that is like, what I really, just to experience, to know that this was coming for so many years, but then to experience it personally, it's like, this is crazy. It's like living in a movie. It's like living in the 1930s. We saw all these people being persecuted, and now, like, you're starting to live through the beginning of it again. It's just mind-boggling. It's like, wow. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it makes me wonder if there's some algorithms or something that just blacklists somebody, for a certain you get flagged for a certain amount of things, and eventually they just wipe you out. Because and that's the thing, like you were talking about having that viral moment and how they took that away from you. It's the same thing with my podcast. I remember being at the gym or being out to eat or whatever, meeting somebody, and typically, eventually the podcast gets brought up a little bit. I always try to restrain myself because I'm always so excited about my work that I, in my show, that I'm like, oh, you might like you might like my show, and I'm like, okay, try to, like, talk to a guy for more than 10 minutes before you bring up that you host a podcast and to tell them to check out your podcast. So, but once in a while, when that would happen, I would be like, oh yeah, you know what? You like this topic? I've interviewed this person. I think that you would like the show. And I'm like, okay, I'll send you the link. And I would just Google, the name of my show, the name of the guest, and it would come up immediately. And typically it was the YouTube version of the episode. It would come up, or iTunes, and I would send it to the person. But once I got kicked off YouTube, like, you get put on a list, and it was obvious, because what happens is that because Google and YouTube, obviously same company, if YouTube doesn't want you, then obviously their parent company also doesn't want you. They assume that there's stuff that they don't want to be in. They don't want to help promote your stuff. So when I would Google my show, I couldn't find it. I would put the exact name of the show, exact numbers. I'm like, you have such advanced algorithms that I could spell something incredibly wrong and you still find what I'm looking for. And now I put in the exact title of the show, the exact name of the guest, and it doesn't come up. It's like something is for sure going.
I discovered that for the first time of my own show, just like in January, like half a year ago, because I remade my website, and just a friend, like a church, I was just telling about my new website, and I don't know why everyone they have their Google search in their phones. Like, I don't use that. I use Brave or Swiss Cows or something. Everyone just does Google, and he types in Geopolitics and Empire into his Google search, and then like nothing appears. And I'm like, are you serious? Like, I was shocked. Like, literally for 5 pages, there's nothing on Geopolitics and Empire, almost nothing in the Google search engine. And then you try any other search engine, even the DuckDuckGo, which is no longer any good, Swiss Cows, Quants, Yandex, Brave. You type in Geopolitics and Empire, and boom, you get the website at the top, Rumble channel, everything else. But in the Google search, we are blacklisted. It's unbelievable. And was your YouTube channel was deleted by YouTube?
Completely deleted. Yes. Yeah. I kept getting strikes for medical misinformation while having medical doctors on. I'm like, I'd love to see the PhD of the fact checker that is telling me that the PhD that I'm interviewing is wrong about the stuff that they're a PhD for. It's like, it doesn't make any sense. It was obvious that it was going to eventually happen. I didn't give a shit really about being on YouTube. I'm like, if I'm not on YouTube, I don't care. I'd rather promote the audio, because there's I haven't had really any sense. I had a couple issues with iTunes a few times when Del Bigtree, Del Bigtree's been on a few times, but the appearance he had on the Ripple Effect podcast during 2020, that was not showing up on people. People were sending me screenshots for like, the show's not there. Wow. And then the same thing happened with Mickey Willis with iTunes, the first time he was on. So it just, yeah. And then eventually the show just magically shows up, and my host for my audio is Podomatic, and I would email them and like, we're talking to iTunes, or saying this is happening or that's happening or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm like, how? I'm like, you think it's a coincidence that they're having technical difficulties or whatever BS that they come up with on these specific shows? But that's why I like Podcast Addict, because you can just get people's RSS feed, put it right in there. You get the audio directly from them, and there seems to be less of a middleman. And
right after my PayPal thing, I got my first Spotify takedown. So then, like, right after that, Spotify sends me I get an email, says takedown notice, Spotify, and they took down one episode as the first from Spotify. And again, as you're saying, you're talking about Del Bigtree and this stuff. And out of all the people they could have taken down was my interview with Jeremy Kuzmarov, who runs Covert Action magazine, which was founded by a CIA whistleblower. And the title was like, we're moving towards a dystopian social order. I mean, of all podcasts, that was not on the top of the list that you would want to, there are other ones, like I said, that were dealing more with the COVID stuff. Why did it randomly, maybe it's some algorithm, as you say, or maybe they're just making a point, because the title says we're moving into a dystopian social order. And the fact that they're now taking down your episode from Spotify kind of proves the point of the title. Kind of like laughing in your face, like, yeah, we are in this dystopia. Here you go. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Spotify, because recently I've been getting messages on Twitter and Facebook and emails from listeners saying that they're having an issue finding my podcast. Or just recently somebody told me that every single time all the podcasts, the Spotify app, I think they show you anytime any of the podcasts you subscribe to have a new episode. And he's like, it works for all my shows except for Ripple Effect podcast. He's like, it never ever tells me when you have a new episode. He's like, I have to physically go into there. Or somebody will tell me, oh, it disappeared for like 24 hours. It wasn't on their phone. And then they open up the app and it was there. So like all these weird things, which just make, it's weird, because in a way I wanted to at least give him a little bit of credit for putting the COVID warnings on.
It's crazy. Like all my, like almost every episode of mine, because we mentioned it, COVID 1984, everything's gonna label COVID labels. Like,
well, what I was gonna say, I'm like, I give them a little bit of credit, because they just help me find which episodes I want to listen to more. And like what I do is like, oh, this one has a warning, this is the one I want to listen to. I'll skip the one that doesn't have a warning. I'm like, okay, maybe if they don't talk about it, especially during when they first did it, when things were still kind of ramping up. I'm like, oh, this has a warning, I want to listen to this. And they were kind of true to their word in regards to having Peter McCullough on and Dr. Robert Malone. And Rogan had a couple of really powerful interviews around that time. that I give him credit for, even with the warnings, that they still at least let him release it. And I mean, think about how many millions and millions and millions of people listen to those episodes. So but you're not the first one to hear that, or you're not the first person to mention, and not the first time I hear that Spotify is doing some type of censoring. And that's why I'm a fan of putting my stuff everywhere and anywhere. I can't, I'm on YouTube as I just started like a clips channel, which was an awful idea because I didn't realize record or putting up clips is basically almost as much time consuming as doing a whole episode. It's like you have to listen to a whole show again anyways, and then you have to find the clip that you like, and then you have to cut it, and you have to upload it, and then thumbnails, and it's like, oh my god, this is so much work just for a little 2-minute clip. So but I'm like, I want some type of presence on YouTube because I think it'll help with people searching my show. But I'm on a bunch of other video platforms, and I think YouTube censorship is the reason why Odyssey, because I remember when Odyssey at one point, like, it wasn't a household name. BitChute, Rumble, people didn't know about these websites. It was like people like you and I knew about them because we're researching and we're looking for places where we can find alternative perspectives and interviews with people that are being censored. But the average person, you tell them like, oh, you can find my show on Rumble. They're like, what's Rumble? You can find my show on Rockfin or BitChute or whatever. They're like, what's that? Have you thought about going on? Oh, you're on Rockfin. You're also on Rockfin. Geopolitics and Empire is on Rockfin, right?
Yeah, it's I kind of view it as like betting on all horses. I don't have at this point. It's like you say, I just opened accounts on MeWe, Minds, Gab, Float, and then for the video platforms, Brighteon, Mike Adams is Brighteon, Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, and then Rockfin accepted me on the. I was going to ask you this. We didn't get to it when you were on my TNT, because I think they did the same thing with you. You've got the Ricky's Rants on Rockfin, because Rockfin wants you to offer something premium to be on the platform. And I have my premium show, Dissident Thinker, which was for members of my website as well as Rockfin's subscribers. But I just got caught up. I haven't had much time to do like these, premium episodes for Rockfin and members. I'm starting it up again, but yeah, Rockfin, I uploaded my entire back catalog. Like, it took me a number of days, but I uploaded my entire back catalog to Rumble and Brighteon and Rockfin. So that's all there, in case it gets taken down to one place, it's in another. And so I think you kind of need to do that, as you said. So there's people that just like BitChute. There's people that just like Rumble, right? And so, but you are starting to see, like, I just opened up an account for Getter, and you see on these different platforms people with huge, massive followings, on Rumble or BitChute or elsewhere. And so slowly, like, yeah, people are rebuilding out of the ashes, reconstructing, their podcasts and channels. So yeah, you kind of have to do that. Yeah.
Well, that's smart. You're right. It is like betting on all horses, because you don't know which one is gonna succeed and become the next big one, and which one's gonna just go out of business. So it's like, just go on all of them. And the way I look at it is, if they let me have these conversations and they're not censoring me, then the more the merrier. I'm on ban.video. I've had some people, it's like, oh, I don't like Alex Jones, why are you on? And it's like, I'm not changing my content to be on there. Like, I'm sharing my content as is. I'm about halfway there with uploading all my shows, because they didn't want me to like completely just overwhelm their page with new videos. So we're doing a couple of videos a day or a week, and I've had plenty of guests on my show that I've talked shit about Alex Jones that are on his platform. So I'm like, I'm not changing my content, and he's not telling me to take those down. So it's like, okay, well, it is what it is. I've had Ryan Dawson on my show years ago, and he probably, I can't remember what specifically he said, but I'm sure he talked shit about Alex Jones, because he always did back in the day. And that's on his platform. So it's like, you know what, like me, and I know that there's some people that talk about, I guess he censored Ryan from Last American Vagabond. I don't know why.
Alex Jones censored Ryan?
Because he was on ban.video, and then apparently there's something happened, and now he's no longer on ban.video. It's funny because last time he was on the show was when it just happened, and I opened the show by asking him about it, because I'm like, is it true that you got? I'm like, because I just got on Band.video and you just got removed from Band.video,
He got banned from Band.video,
which is hilarious. I know it's super funny, and then he's like, yeah, and then he kind of I don't know if it was just that the conversation went a different direction, we never went back to it, or maybe he didn't want to go into the specifics. But people have asked me, and I'm like, I honestly don't know why he got banned. And I mean, I don't know. Just because one person's banned from there doesn't mean that I'm gonna remove all my archives. It's like, I'm just, I want people to listen to my work and listen to the conversations and be exposed to the guests that are on my show. And I don't care where they do it. And I don't have to agree with the platform or whoever runs the platform. But if they let me post my work there, it's like, okay, then I'm gonna take advantage of it. It's interesting.
My motto is, there's people like on my Telegram channel. I mean, even that, like I started it up a year or two ago, probably less than 2 years, and for Geopolitics and Empire and Telegram. And it's like, you start, you got a few dozens, few hundred followers. Now I'm almost to 10,000. It's like quite the road. And I think for a lot of content, I don't know why others aren't doing this. It's like, yeah, it takes time, but it's worth it. Like if you put in that time, you're not getting rewards immediately, but this is what you have to do to build your stuff. I mean, I'm telling other people that I know that I collaborate with, like, create a Telegram channel, start posting stuff there. And then they create it, and then they're not consistently posting, and then it's not growing. And you just kind of have to. But my motto is, people say, oh, stop using Twitter, just use Telegram. And I'm like, no, my motto is to go out in the blaze of glory, like Bon Jovi sings, Young Guns too. Like I want that badge of honor. I want to be banned from Twitter. I want to be banned from Facebook. So I'm going to keep using it until they deplatform and ban me. That's my motto.
Yeah, and the way I look at it is that that's kind of the people you want to reach also. It's like, you don't want to just go in an echo chamber. I mean, it's great to give people who are actually looking for that information, to give them content. The people who are going to Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, Rockfin, they're people who are actually seeking conversations like this. So it's nice to give them what they're looking for. But there's also a lot of people who just don't, they don't know about those alternative platforms. They don't know about the shows and people that we like and we listen to. And so if we can reach them, why not? And if anything, it's kind of like a F you to big tech, because it's like, they don't want our type of shows or just us in general on their platforms. So we're kind of getting away with being on their platforms without them wanting us there. So I'm going to keep doing it as long as I can get away with it. And but in regards to, have you ever heard of the company Content Safe?
No.
So Matt Raymer. He has become a friend from just working with him, but we have a mutual friend called Richard Grove. You know who Richard?
Oh yeah. By the way, I don't know if I got his email correct. I wanted to have him on. You'll have to.
Yeah. Yeah. If I ever have anybody on that you're interested in, let me know. I'll hook you up, and I'll also have you on, like I said, hopefully a future.
He's one of my top guys, Richard Grove. Like he's like literally got a library brain, and I mean, I think he did well. So he's had the finances to be able, maybe to have the time to read all this stuff. And I mean, he's been doing it since forever. And he's got so many of the physical copies. And just the way he explains everything, I mean, it takes hours to explain this stuff, but even he is able to compact such a vast amount of info in like 1 or 2 hours. Like I remember I listened to one of his lectures a few months ago. Like for those 2 hours, I'm like, man. Like, and I thought about like interviewing him. Like, I don't know what else I would ask him. Like, he just lays everything out in 2 hours. But yeah, he's one of my and I think he's underrated. Like, more people should know about his work. Yeah,
that's a really good point, because it's funny, because when I ran into his Tragedy and Hope website and I got to know him, and I was always stunned by the people who didn't know who he was or didn't appreciate him to the extent that I felt like he deserved appreciation. I'm like, this guy has done just incredible work with his documentary State of Mind, The Psychology of Control, his Peace Revolution podcast. Now he started that
Grand Theft Auto. No?
Yeah, Grand Theft Auto.
Well, that's too much though. Like that's like 5 hours. It's like there's no way I can consume that much.
Well, it's definitely like for somebody like me who has a job that is, I'm either driving or in the office going crazy looking at a computer, then it's nice to have it in the background. It's a good time killer, but it is a little long. Luckily, I think it makes it easy because not all 6 hours or 5 hours is them talking. It's a lot of clips, videos. So, if you only took the parts that they're talking, it probably would be, half that. But it's yeah, he's such a fascinating guy. But he introduced me to, and the other thing too is they always say, like, you don't want to meet your heroes or somebody that you're a big fan of, because you're going to be disappointed. When he was on my show, he just moved to Hartford, I believe, or somewhere near Hartford. I'm like, oh, I live in Massachusetts, not too far from the line of Connecticut. Let's hook up. Let's get together. And super nice guy. His family's super nice. His wife, his friends, everybody's super nice. So he is equally as nice as as he is on air, as he is off air. And but he introduced me to this guy called Matt from Content Safe, who is actually a friend of his, who's done his autonomy course, his University of Reason kind of online course thing. And what he's like this tech guy, really smart, savvy guy, who basically created and I don't even know how he does it, to be completely honest. To me, it's magic. He's a wizard. But it's what he's done is that at the time I was still on YouTube. So what I was doing is I was uploading my videos onto YouTube, and then he would sync all my video channels together. So within a couple or so, it's weird. I don't even know why. Sometimes it takes a couple hours and I see it everywhere. Other times it takes a day or two. But either way, after uploading onto YouTube, I upload my videos. Eventually, it's on my Odyssey channel, Rockfin, Float, Rumble, Minds, all my channels, just like that. And it saves me all that time from uploading, saves me, all the time from punching in the description and all that stuff. So it's awesome. And I'm like, wow, he does with video what basically you can do with audio. Like with audio, we all upload to one location and it goes everywhere. And I'm like, this is a great idea that he basically figured out a way to do it with video and save us this trouble because before, when I first started podcasting, some people were still uploading to iTunes individually and different places individually. And then I'm like, oh, this is awesome that you can just upload to one place and it goes to all the locations. So, but if you're doing what I'm doing, and that's like expanding to as many platforms as possible, contacting him might be he's also a good podcast guest because he's a fascinating guy. But he might be somebody you might want to contact in regards to helping you out. The cool thing about Matt is that he's a consumer of podcasts. He probably knows of your show. Chances are he's a huge consumer of podcasts. He's a fan of the people that he's helping. So that's kind of cool that, like, it's not just a person who's looking for a business opportunity or just found a different way of using his skills. He's actually a fan of podcasts. He finds them important. He understands how important they are to get this information out there, and it's his way of kind of contributing to doing that. So it's really cool, and you can look it up. It's content.
I just found it. Yeah, contentsafe.co.
Yeah, co. Yeah, contentsafe.co. So definitely reach out, or I'll introduce you and hook you up, and hopefully you can help with that.
Yeah, I'll check that out. Well, you said you uploaded to YouTube. I mean, but now you can't really.
Yeah. So now what we did after I got banned off YouTube, I'm like, okay, now I got to pick another platform to upload to. So now what he did, he just changed the setup or how it works.
You do it to Rumble and it goes everywhere else.
Exactly. Yeah. Now I upload to Odyssey, and my only complaint, I like Odyssey. I like the way it looks. I like everything about Odyssey. I actually like it probably better than many of the other platforms. And Rockfin, I like. My only problem with Rockfin is the links. In the show description, they give you such limited, limited space to put in information. So, like, I have the show description, I have links to my guests. I always like to put in all their links, all their websites, all that stuff to make it easy for people to connect with them. And then I put all my stuff, like my sponsors, the ways to support the show, the Union Unwanted links. And on Rockfin, it's like that stuff never ends up being there, so it ends up being a little bit of a pain in the butt, but at the end of the day, Rockfin, when everybody else was banning us, was one of few platforms that were letting us share interviews on what was really going on in the world. So, for that, I'm definitely grateful.
I would just add, like, meeting some of the people, like you said, in real life. Of these people that we're talking, I haven't been disappointed. It was like 5 years ago. I'm sure you know Daniel Estulin, the Bilderberg guy. Daniel Estulin. He's like sold 7 million copies. He wrote the book on Bilderberg, documentary. He had an RT show. I got to hang out with him for an entire day here in Mexico. My students, I took him to my university to give a talk, and then my students organized the conference downtown here for him. And so, I got to hang out with him for a day. And then Geopolitics Griffin took me out to lunch like a decade ago. I had lunch with Geopolitics Griffin, and then people like Morris Berman, who's this historian who wrote the trilogy on the fall of American Empire. He lives here in Mexico. I had breakfast with him, and so like it was really cool. I never had any like bad experiences with any of these people.
Yeah, it's the same here. I've met Richard Gage in person, James Perloff. I'm trying to think who else and a lot of people was from the Red Pill Expo in 2018 or 19 when they were in Connecticut in Hartford, and I met a bunch of everybody was super nice. Dell was there, Big Tree, but he was a fan favorite, so it was hard. I'm like, I don't want to get in the way of all the all the girls that are trying to get a picture with him, and but. Yeah, I mean, everybody's super nice. And there's anybody who's not super nice anytime. I mean, I'm sure you've had some guests that you're like, I don't know if I'm going to invite them back again, and either because they're really, I don't know, like they're really hard to extract the most out of them. There's certain guests that it's like, okay, like Richard Grove, for example. First time Richard Grove was on my show, I think we broke the record for my longest show. I think it was 3 hours. And,
wow.
You just have to literally ask him a question and he gets going, and I'm kind of the same way. Like when I'm interviewed on other shows, people are always like, oh, this is an easy interview. And I'm like, you know what? That's a compliment, because when I have guests on and it's not an easy interview and it's somebody have to like pry out like some information or get them to talk, it can be not as fun or a little, and then you have certain people that I'm like, I don't have to do any prepping for this. Like I'll just have them on and it will just talk and things will go well and we're, and it'll be fine. But so Richard's definitely like that. But I've had a few guests that I'm just like, they do good work in regards to information, but I don't know if I want to sit down and have.
I mean, there's a number of issues there. Some of them relate to the technical part where the guests, maybe because they're of old age, and they can't handle the I have had a few guests where their audio was extremely poor, and like they can't get that right. So it's like, if your audio isn't good, I can't have you on. As great as you are, it's just like, that's a fundamental thing. So there's some people who just have trouble with that for whatever reason, the technical part. And as you say, though, I kind of like, it's got to be somewhere in the middle, because sometimes you'll have a guest where they answer too briefly and then you run out of questions. I'm like, now what? Or they just go on for so long, or sometimes they'll just repeat stuff they've said before, or they'll go off on tangents and like, I want you to talk about this, and they go off on these tangents and they just go on. And yeah.
You're right. You can do both extremes. I'm probably less likely to do the short answer. Chances are you'll be like, oh, how's your day going? And then you don't get a word in for an hour. That's like typically my style. It's funny because I'm like, when I first started my podcast, people would always like kind of joke around and be like, oh yeah, podcast is, if for the people who knew what a podcast was at the time, they're like, oh yeah, podcast is perfect for you because you like to talk. And I'm like, I don't really like talking as much as I like conversation. And there is a difference. Like especially as I get older, I'm not a fan of like small talk as much as I used to be. Like, I feel like, I could small talk with people and I still enjoy it from time to time, but like, I don't look forward or engage in it as much as I used to. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, I'd rather have a deep conversation about something, or a thoughtful conversation, or just not have one at all, and just be one of my thoughts and kind of just, spend some time thinking about my own life or ideas that I'm kind of pondering on. So it's like, I do seem to avoid those type of things a little more than I used to. It's not and I almost feel like as a podcaster, and I think I said this recently, I don't know, on my show or somebody else's show, about how you notice, and I guess this is a good question for you, because I'm curious, did you notice that in the beginning when you first start your show, right? Like a lot of us start a show because we feel like there's either things we want to talk about or opinions that we want to share with the world, or those type of things. So you do much more talking, and then as time goes by, and the more it's like that saying, the more you learn, the more you realize you have to learn, right? Or you have, however it goes, like the more you know, the less the more you know,
the less you know. Basically, in the end, the less you know. No.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's like the more I learn things, the more I realize I have things to learn. Like I become much less certain about things, right? And because as time goes by, I'm like, okay, this is where I stand on this issue right now, but I've been wrong. My opinions have changed before, so I'm not as extreme in my views as I used to be. Where like, before it was like, oh, this is my opinion on this thing, and I would stand right by it, and I'd be very confident. Now I'm less confident in just about everything, because my opinions and perspectives have changed so much. So as time has gone by, I've become, and I'm sure some people are probably laughing as I say this, but I've become more of a listener than a talker. And where like now it's like, okay, I want to spend, instead of just like taking this as an opportunity to kind of share my thoughts, I want to hear your thoughts, and then dive into those things. And even when we talk about my thoughts, I'm talking about how I'm uncertain about them, and I'm open to different perspectives. Where before it was like, this is my opinion on this issue, this is my opinion on that issue, this is, and anytime somebody's really extreme on their views, it's like, okay, let me pump the brakes. Because anytime you're that tribalistic about your opinion on something, then that also means that anything that goes against that, you're going to dismiss immediately and not entertain, which is kind of the definition of ignorance, right? It's like you're kind of ignoring any new information, and you're just sticking to your guns regardless. Have you seen that yourself change in time throughout all these years of podcasting?
Well, I would say that, well, when I started, I was, maybe because I was more timid or nervous, I would talk less, and I didn't even put my name. It was just Geopolitics and Empire, because I always had kind of the same philosophy as I have now, where it's not about me, it's about the ideas and the guest. And they're the guest expert, and I want them to do give me their memory dump, their data dump. And I would not talk much. I would just have my questions and let them rip without much interruption. And I think that's what a lot of my listeners like. And I think one of the things that I do is, even if my guest brings up stuff that I completely disagree with, I don't say anything, because I get them on for a specific reason. For example, I recently had on, and I have on leftists that I'm a conservative, but I'll have on leftists. Like, for example, I just recently had on this professor Inderjit Parmar from the UK. He's like leftist, but he does some really fascinating stuff. And he was talking about the elite connections between the US and the Chinese elite. And for us, that kind of tells us a lot about the whole Great Reset thing, right? Are they on board or are they not? So he's done this groundbreaking research there. But then he talks about January 6th and Trump, and how, I'm getting in trouble now, how that was like an insurrection. I'm like, you're way off the mark. That was a false flag operation. That was not a coup attempt. But I kind of like let him say it, and let's move on to the other stuff, or climate stuff. I have guests who talk about like climate change, is a fraud. But I had Yves Engler, Canadian activist, and he was talking about how deeply involved Canada is in the Ukraine war, like how instrumental the Canadian government. I mean, I forget what he said, that like the Canadian forces were like the godfathers of the Ukrainian army, because they trained, like everyone thinks US and Europe, and no one knows about how the key role Canada has in the Ukraine war. But then, at some point he starts talking about climate, and I'm like, I totally disagree with him, but I find it more valuable not to say anything and just let them continue their train of thought, because you're going to get all those gold nuggets about that other stuff. Whereas if I just interrupt there and start an argument about climate change or January 6th, things can go really bad, or we can get diverted from the original intent. And so I'm just like, do your data dump, do your magic, and me and the listeners will take what we like, and the stuff we don't like we'll discard. And I feel like it's diplomatic because I studied the Geneva School of Diplomacy, and just kind of like, yeah, and just give them. I try not to talk too much, but I have found lately now I talk a little bit more, but not in the contentious sense, just more about maybe the ideas that we're talking about. But I still try to let my guests speak the most. So,
well, it's funny because I've done both. I've listened to somebody talk and they've said something that I completely disagree with, and I'm like, okay, let me come back to that. And then they'll continue talking, and they kind of just like scratch the surface of it, but they're onto another idea. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I don't want to go back to that and then spark a giant debate. And then other times I'm just like, I'm like, you know what? Let's talk about it. If we disagree, let's talk. I had Scott Horton on my show during the lockdown, and me and him have done a lot of shows throughout the years. And so I felt comfortable disagreeing with him because we like each other, we get along. And we had a whole show where we disagreed the whole time about the lockdown, and I pushed back on him.
What was his view?
Well, he felt like it was, like he was kind of taking a perspective of like, play it safe, like, well, just on the safe side, like maybe we should stay home on the safe side. I'm like, no, this is about controlling us. This isn't about the virus. And I think his wife has like some health issues that made him a little concerned, and maybe some family members had some health issues that made him a little concerned. So this idea of like, okay, maybe it's not dangerous to the average person, but it could be dangerous to my wife. So I said this on AM Wake Up with Pasta and Steve. I'm like, there's a lot of people that think they have strong beliefs, and then when shit hits the fan and it's hard to have those beliefs, then you really find out how strong your beliefs really are. And and I'm not saying that about Scott, but I guess I am saying it about him a little bit, where it's like, I was kind of stunned as such a face to the libertarian movement, somebody that I absolutely adore his information in regards to geopolitics and history and wars and proxy wars. And then to see him kind of fold to the fear of a virus, I'm like, I'm like, it's just, it was a little concerning. But what wasn't concerning, what people enjoyed about the conversation, was that at that time, nobody who disagreed could have a civil conversation. And I think we had like a 90-minute civil conversation of disagreement, and where we just shared our perspectives and why. Same thing with Dr. Robert Lustig, which is, he had a viral video years ago called The Bitter Truth, and it was about sugar. And it was this lecture that went viral. He was in every documentary, every paleo keto documentary and book. And, it was a huge deal because he was one of the first people to put a lot of emphasis and attention on the fact that there was a actual conspiracy with sugar in the sugar industry, and how we're over consuming it and how dangerous it is. And I've been a fan of his for years, and I've been trying to get him on for years. And this is one of those few funny stories where, or one of those few times where what happened was that I couldn't get a hold of somebody, and then out of nowhere I get an email saying, hey, this guy wants to come on your show to promote his new book. And I'm like, that's hilarious, because I've been trying to get him on for years. I'm like, absolutely, come on the show. And we had a great conversation. And then at the very end, he said something about the COVID vaccine. And I'm just like, yeah, but it's not, and I'm like, and then next thing you know, like, and I think we only had like 5 minutes left, and we get in this little debate about it. And it was same thing with like, when I had Roger Stone on, not Roger Stone, I had, when I had Jack Abramoff on, we got in a debate about, I don't know if it was about law or what, I don't even know what it was about, but like, I pushed back a little bit, because the thing with me is like, in a way, sometimes I feel like I'm not being honest if I, okay, here's the other example. Dennis McKenna, I had who is Terrence McKenna's brother. I've had Dennis. I don't know if you know Terrence. He's the guy who's really well known for his DMT, LSD promotion and stuff like that. But Dennis, very smart guy, huge into plant medicines, and he's big into trying to get some of these plant medicines legal, and he understands the dangers of big pharma. The first time he was on my show years ago, We talked about how like there's all these natural remedies, and there's we should look at medicine as like plants and root extracts, and what we've looked at, that's what we considered medicine for many years, and the dangers of big pharma. And then all of a sudden I have him on around the COVID time, and right, I think right before the election, and he goes on right in the beginning, goes on this giant tangent about being anti-Trump, pro Joe Biden, and how Trump's the worst guy ever, and Joe. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like, you're still that 60s liberal that like thinks that all Republicans are bad and all, you know, and all Democrats are good. And I'm like, you know, and we got in like a discussion about it. I'm like pushing back a little bit, and I'm like, if I don't say something, I'm like, I sometimes I don't feel right. Like I feel like my listeners know where I stand. If I don't say something, then it's like, Ricky, why'd you just let them say that shit? And also sometimes it's not just about pushing back for the purpose of pushing back, and like I don't want to just make somebody look dumb. That's not the purpose, or I'm not trying to show that I'm smarter or more knowledgeable or whatever. It's more like, you know what, like, why do you believe that? And this is going to get me a better understanding of who you are and your thinking and your philosophies and the things that influence your thinking and philosophies, because we're shining a light. It's really easy to just talk about the things we agree on, but some of my favorite conversations are when we're talking about things we disagree on. And so it's like, I think sometimes you have to do that, but sometimes, like you said, what happens is it goes way off the rails, and I'm like, that interview would have been so much better if I just shut my mouth and just let them keep talking.
Well, my point is, like, I get them on like Yves Engler, like his thing is Canada's role in the military industrial complex, the American empire, foreign policy. That's his like specialty, expertise, great at it. And that's what I invite him on to talk about. And then if he talks, let's say, climate, which I disagree with, you know, there are a number of issues we could have. Like maybe if I start an argument, he'll get offended and he won't want to come back on. So I've lost that guest forever. Or I feel with a lot of these issues, you're not going to change their minds at all. And so it's just best to spend the remaining time on the issue of expertise that I wanted to have them on. Like another example, I recently had a guest on who talks about the border security complex. I've never heard anyone talk about this. And he's an expert. He wrote a book. I've had him on Geopolitics and Empire and recently on TNT as well. And he talks about this crazy thing that's such an important piece of the puzzle that we're all discovering about the New World Order that nobody's talked about. He's like a progressive leftist, and was like, I try to just stick to the thing that he's really expert in. And he's in his research, he showed how the prison planet is going to be built out. That, you know, the whole TSA border control high-tech structure that we have, that the US is actually financing and training the rest of the countries of the world. Like they're bringing in African countries and Middle Eastern countries and European countries to the US to train them how to replicate this same border control system to all the borders and countries of the rest of the world. The EU is launching next year the ETIAS online system modeled on the US TSA Patriot Act system. And so I'm like, whoa, it's like, this is called the border security complex is what he calls. Like, so they're literally building out the prison planet, and every country is going to have this high-tech control system. And if you don't like, if you're a thought criminal, you know, you're going to have to send in biometrics and all this data, and they can just say, oh, you can't go. You know, when non-Europeans next year want to go to Europe, they have to pay €7 and fill out this online form with all this data, and the EU can just deny you, and you can't go to Europe anymore. But it's going to be the same for every single country. So it's going to be a total exit entry control system. So this guy, like, genius on this. So like, so the other stuff, I'll you know, let's not talk about it. Let's talk about your border issue. You know, your thoughts on Trump and all of that. Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's a really good point, because I think sometimes somebody can still, like when I had Jack Abramoff on, or even when I've had Roger Stone on, I've had some people that are like, why are you having that person on, or what, you know, and to make your point, I say the same things to people. I'm like, they have some information that's valuable. They have a insight on the things that, you know, is exclusive to only people in their positions. If we can learn from that, then even if we disagree with what they've done or maybe their opinions on other things. It doesn't mean we can't get some value out of this discussion. And you don't have to have people on that you agree on everything with. I'm big into diet and nutrition. I've had keto people on, I've had paleo people on, I've had carnivore people on, I've had vegans on. I mean, I've had all different types of philosophies on the show. And to me, it's like, there's still things you can learn and extract from people that you disagree with. And
let me just add though, there are some red lines. Like I've had sometimes I get agents pitch possible guests on my podcast, and I got one dude, I won't say his name, but I think this must have been some kind of setup. 3 times they emailed me, and he's like former BBC. And just something really weird going on. Like he seems almost like a government, some kind of operative. But I looked him up. Literally on every single point, we are diametrically opposite. He's like super climate change. We're gonna die in 5 years. He's still to this day like, we need the mask up. He's like, he tweeted himself, "I'm the only guy wearing a mask in the supermarket. What's going on?" And then he's like, Trump fascist, cool. Climate vax up. You know what I'm saying? Like every single point we're diametrically opposed. Why would he want to come on my show? Like there's no, like, what we're going to talk about. Like we disagree about completely everything. That is really weird. And so I just never responded. I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe it's some kind of a setup. Just sorry. No, that's kind of too much.
yeah, I've had a lot of weird. So as the show's grown, I've more and more people contact me about coming on the show, and I couldn't even imagine being even like somebody like Corbett. James Corbett, a huge platform. I couldn't. I don't even know how he finds my emails when I email him. I'm
He's
like,
pretty fast though.
he is pretty fast. So like I'll have people, same thing, like somebody will, like, perfect example, Cowspiracy. It was a documentary about it was like this anti meat documentary, and they contacted me, and I'm like, I'm basically a carnivore. I'm like, I literally eat the majority of my calories I consume is meat. I'm like, I don't know if you're right or wrong, but I don't know if I feel comfortable doing this podcast, because I feel like I'm just going to be that jerk host, like pushing back on everything on every point. And then eventually they end up going on the Rogan podcast, and Rogan had him on and he entertained their ideas, and then he ended up and this is he had the same problem that I was concerned about, that they're going to be well researched, but of course in research that only defends their perspective, and they're going to state all these things, and I'm like, if you say it's true, I guess it's true. I mean, I don't have the research in front of me. I don't know. I don't have the time to analyze it. And he did the same thing, where like afterwards, he's like on a later show, he talked about how a lot of the stuff that they brought up was incorrect, or there's conflicting opinions on that stuff. So I'm always concerned about that stuff. But I also get crazy people email me from time to time, like, I'm a whistleblower. I was in a UFO at Area 51, and I'm like, sure you were, buddy. Like, but this is what happens, because I'm a good person and I want to believe that there's good people out there who wouldn't come up with such ridiculous stories. I'm like, what if this person really is a fucking whistleblower, and I'm going to have the first UFO whistleblower on my show, and I'm blowing him off like a crazy person? Like, if he was real, the majority of people he contacts are thinking the same thing I'm thinking. He's crazy. So maybe maybe I should entertain this. Maybe I should look into it. So I'll do some looking around to see if they've done other interviews, and so it's like, it's hard to tell. Sometimes you're just like, okay, maybe this is it seems too crazy to believe, but maybe it's there's a lot of things that end up being true that seem initially too crazy to believe. So it's
yeah, I get some of that stuff, but like I had one person email me wanting to be a guest, and I look at their website and it's just a jumble. Like it's this total wacky, but a wacky kind of conspiracy person. And you go to their website and you're trying to you can't even make sense of anything. And it's like, there has to be some minimal level of credibility, and you have to be presentable. But if you're like this, I mean, I can't do anything with that. And we have to manage our podcast. You have to have people that are, some level of credibility, and presentability. You can't just have random wacky people. And I also don't want to take the chance where I record something with someone and in the end decide I'm not going to publish it. And that's happened only like one time, and it was because the person in the end, it was a brief interview, they really didn't say anything. Like there was nothing there. And I thought this person maybe was also involved. It was a really strange episode. I don't want to go into it. It was while I was in abroad, but this person like worked for a lot of these international institutions. And I think they were probably doing some undercover CIA stuff. And I thought, well, maybe he's going to tell me something. And we sat down. It was an in-person interview, like 10, 20-minute interview. And he just gave these boring official like talking points about international affairs. And there was like really nothing there. There was like, you didn't say anything. I can't post this. So, yeah.
It is funny how that works, and sometimes there's certain guests that are smaller, and like I remember running into Clint Richardson, I think that's his name, who did a Wagging a Tail, or I forget what the hell the name of he did a couple like documentaries that were really good and well researched, and he he was kind of unknown to me. I didn't know who he was. And ended up being a really, but it's funny. He's actually an example of somebody that I end up disagreeing with on many things, and we end up spending a lot of the conversation, or at least at the end of the conversation, kind of disagreeing and pushing back a little bit. And then also an example of a unknown guest that ends up being really well researched and really knowledgeable, and you feel like, okay, this is a podcast where people are going to get something out of it. There's going to be something of value here. So, and sometimes that's what happens. Like when Dr. Jessica Rose, as you know, like one of the most fascinating people to talk to, because you could talk to her about so many different topics. And yet when I had her on, when Dr. James Lyons Wheeler suggested having her on, I couldn't find any interviews with her. I'm like, who is this lady? I'm like, I couldn't even find a website. I'm like, oh God. I'm like, oh, this is going to be rough. And then, we talked for like, I don't know, 2-3 hours, no problem. Very fascinating. So sometimes there's lesser known people that are more fascinating than kind of like the marquee names that everybody kind of knows.
But speaking also of length, like I know there are people, I think your podcast, I guess you go sometimes for hours. And I was recently interviewed on a guy, Wheezy, who does the What is Truth podcast. Yeah, he had me on for 3 hours, and I was like, and he's done like 8 hours. I'm like, man, you're crazy. And for some reason though, I don't know, because maybe when I was starting out and I was getting some guests that were, high level, I've interviewed some former ambassadors and people, people, and my thought was I was lucky enough to get a hold of them, and I don't want to keep them for too long. And so I just kind of, I used to do like 20 to 30-minute interviews and sometimes an hour, but now it's just like become, without thinking, it's like 50 to 60 minutes is my format. Like before it was much varied, but now it's just like 50 minutes is my sweet spot, depending on the guest, sometimes 60 minutes. And I don't know why, I just kind of like that. I feel like if you go longer, I don't know. I feel like 1 hour is good. What's your philosophy on that?
So I like to schedule it for an hour, but then I like to keep going if it's flowing, right? Like, and sometimes it's like, okay, do I have the time? And it's like, okay, I have time. The conversation's flowing. Like, why stop it right here? Like, let's see where it goes. Let's continue seeing where it goes. So sometimes that's fun. I feel like an hour is definitely the minimum. I think Jesse Ventura, when he was on, it was like 30 minutes or 40 minutes or something like that. And I've had like just a handful of shows where it's like, oh, he's only available for 30 minutes or whatever. And I'm like, actually, Mike Adams, I think years ago, he was only on for like 30 minutes. I had him on a long time ago. And so I'm just like, I felt like it was too short. It's like 30 minutes. We could barely really get into get into anything. It's just like a hour, like you said, is like that perfect sweet spot where it's like,
for some of these people though, like I've been trying to get a hold of Mike Adams, like to get him on. With some of these people, it's nearly impossible. No.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that, because I've been trying to get a hold of Mike Adams recently too. I'm like, I went back in my archives. I couldn't find his, or I found an email, but it was an old email. It didn't work anymore. I'm like, how do people get a hold of you? I try to find creative ways of getting in contact with people. I'll check their websites. I'll check their Facebook, Twitter, every platform they're on, seeing if there's any contact information. Sometimes like one thing works for one person, doesn't work for another. It's weird. It's like you really.
This is a funny thing. Like recently, I mean, we both did the same thing. It's like there's a guy called Matt Bracken who used to be on InfoWars, like a former Marine or something. And I'm trying to get him on for my TNT show. He's got a website, and you're like, I spent like half an hour literally scouring every inch of the website. There's like no contact, literally nothing. And then he's got no other social media, but he's got Gab. And then like I go on Gab, and no one ever responds to their messages on Gab. Like I even sent Andrew Torba of Gab a message, or some other people. And like that was my only way to try to get in contact. It's like, what do you do beyond that? At some point, it's like, how can you find? I don't know. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, well, that's kind of I do the same thing. I try Instagram, I try Twitter, I try literally every avenue I can think of. One thing I'm not a huge fan of, and I've gotten better at it because I've helped so many other people. Throughout the years, people would be like, "Oh, do you mind if if you help me contact this person?" I'm like, "Sure, sure." And I would never ask for anybody's email. I'm like, let me see if I can get a hold of them first. And I would just kind of exhaust that avenue until eventually I'm like, dude, I just can't get a hold of this person. And I'm like, and I know this person knows them. I could ask, but I'm like, you know what? Let me see if let me just send another email. Let me, I'm like, I was always self-conscious of like, I don't want them to think I'm using them to get to somebody else, So, but then throughout the years, I became much more comfortable because I'm like, okay, well, friends of mine, people who have good shows and people I like in the community, I help them get people. I'm like, so, if they have somebody on that I'm a fan of, maybe they'll return the favor and I can ask and I feel comfortable because I helped them out. So, but yeah, I mean, get people, that's like a common question for podcasters. Like, how do you get a hold of these guests? And sometimes I'll write an email to the same person about 100. Ben Swan's a perfect example.
The thing that I love Ben Swan, but it was years ago, and he's done like a number of projects that like started and then stopped. And I remember like I donated to one of the projects, and I think one of the rewards for whatever I donated was like an actual interview with him or something. And then I never got it. And then I can't remember very well, but I've just sent him mails. Like he's got his sovereign thing now. You just can't get an interview.
Well, it's funny because I remember contacting a few people who have interviewed him or talked to him or connected with them. And I'm like, hey, I keep emailing them, and I swear I got the wrong email address because I cannot get a hold of this guy. And I would send them. I'm like, this is the one I have. They're like, no, that's the right one. I'm like, okay, well, I'm like, apparently I'm in a spam mail or something, or he blocked me for some whatever reason. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And then so years would go by, and then I remember this like it was yesterday because it was so surreal and weird. Like it was a Saturday morning, and I emailed him like, let me send another email just for the heck of it. And it was a Saturday morning, and I was doing some editing. And
he's like, stop emailing me now.
Well, immediately he emailed me back and said, sure, when? And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, you know how many emails throughout the years I've sent to you to this email address? And it's like, and then out of nowhere, like it just weird. Right place, right time, where, he ended up maybe opening up his inbox and just seeing it or whatever. Same thing with this journalist, this Portuguese journalist, Mariana Vanzeller. And she's been on the Rogan podcast too. And I remember couldn't get a hold of her, and I'm like, we're both Portuguese. I'm like, she's been on the Rogan podcast. I'm a fan of Rogan. I'm like, it would be awesome to get her on, and I love her work. She's done some great documentaries like Oxycontin Express, and I couldn't get a hold of her. And then one night, like I saw that she tweeted something, and it was like late. It was like 11 o'clock or something like that. And I'm like, wait, if she's on on Twitter right now, and she just tweeted something, let me see if I tweet her real quick right now while she's looking at her phone. Maybe I'll get her attention. So I tweeted her real quick. I'm like, hey, will you come, or would you be interested in coming on the Ripple Effect podcast? And then she wrote, yeah, just DM me. And then like we end up connecting. And I'm like, it worked for her, if that one, but there's been plenty of people I've tweeted that I've never heard from. So it's it's like the luck of the draw, and the thing is, you just have to keep chugging away, keep doing it. And it was funny because I heard somebody say this, and it's so true. Like, you never know which show or which interview is going to be the one that like takes off. So you just know that if you keep doing them, right, eventually, hopefully, one of them will be the one. So it's like you put in the work and you put in the time, because it's like you never know which guest and which interview or whatever. But you do know if you stop doing it, then you're never going to have one of those interviews go viral or, you know, whatever. And I don't care about like being famous or any of that nonsense or being popular or whatever. I mean, it's nice to have the respect of the community. And it'd be nice to be able to do something I actually enjoy for a living. And that means just like keep the lights on. You know, I don't need a Rolls Royce and a Bentley in the garage. I just, you know, need to be able to pay for the gas of the car that's in the garage.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, it has to do with timing as well. And these people probably get a lot of messages. Well, I get kind of annoyed. I get listeners sending me mails or messages urging me to interview people. Like I interviewed Paul Craig Roberts at the start of the year. Over the years, I've interviewed him like more than half a dozen times, but he's great. It's like I interviewed him in January and someone tells me like in February or March, get Paul Craig Roberts on again. And I'm like, no, I just spoke to him like a month or two ago. I like to give space. Like maybe I'll have a guest on once or twice a year. I mean, depending on, you know, them. Someone like, you know, who's elderly and important, like Paul Craig Roberts, like maybe once a year, twice a year. I don't want to bug him, right? And I recently had on Ed Calderon. He's been on Joe Rogan a number of times. He's gone viral. He's that Mexican American, like former Mexican. Yeah, he talks about the Mexico narco stuff. So he got huge on Joe Rogan. I had him on.
He's the Australian guy.
No, he's Mexican, a Mexican American, Ed Calderon. And someone's, you know, telling me, get him on again. I'm like, it was hard getting him on in the first time. So imagine just like two months later, 3 months, it's like, no, I can't do that. But I was going to say, it was funny, like, you know, Adam Curry, the godfather of podcasting, No Agenda. I wanted to get him on and I can't find any contact. I haven't tried hard enough, but anyways, it was funny because he was discussing on his show my interview with Ron Unz of Unz.com, where, I mean, that was actually a funny story because I got contacted by Ron Unz, and I didn't know, sometimes I don't know who is who, you know, if people send you links or stuff and I never click on any of that stuff. And it's like, I have to kind of double check. But anyways, Adam was discussing my interview with Ron Unz on his show, but he never mentioned Geopolitics and Empire. Like he's playing my interview with Ron Unz. I'm like, well, at least say Geopolitics and Empire. And he didn't. But anyways, I had wanted to get him on and I tried to do like a tweet. You can't send messages to him, but you like a reply. And then some listeners say, yeah, Adam, come on, Geopolitics and Empire. But you got to just keep trying. I don't know. Have you had him on, Adam?
No. He's another one that I've attempted to get on and I haven't. The person I was thinking about in regards to Mexican cartel is TJ English. He's been on the Rogan podcast and he's also been on this show. He's really good. Look into him if you're interested in that topic. And then the other one that's been on the Rogan podcast, really fascinating guy. He's a Australian. What the hell? I just had his name. Ian Grillo.
Grillo. Yeah, I've had him on Geopolitics and Empire. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. He's another really fascinating.
He lives here in Mexico. Yeah, I think he's in Mexico City. I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, it's always cool when you have the same guests of a huge show like that, you know, and it's always cooler when you get the guest before he does, you know, where I remember when I had Dr. Dominic DeAgostino on and I was writing him and I'm like, hey, you know, like you should go on the Rogan podcast because he has a much bigger platform than me and he'd really help get this information out there. And then he's like, I'm actually going to be on there next week. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. You know, so it's funny how like people use that as the measuring stick. It's like, if you've had people on that Rogan's had on, then it's like, oh, it must be a legit podcast. You know, it's like, well, you know, like it's not, some of us who aren't as big as Rogan are doing good work and have equally a good eye for interesting guests also. So without a doubt, but speaking of being busy, and I know I didn't ask you how much time you had, and I know I've taken up a bunch of it. I do want people to have a moment to let people know where they can get your show, how both shows, the TNT radio show and Geopolitics and Empire, how often you do them, and then the best places to listen to them.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to start like now is exactly like now when you stop is when I start prepping for my live TNT show in a couple of hours. But yeah, just the website, geopoliticsandempire.com. And just go through there. You can get on my free email list, which I really want people to get on, and follow me on Twitter and Telegram. And subscribe to the platforms there and the show. And there you'll find my show to TNT. It's tntradio.live, and you'll find my show page there. And that's, pretty much anything that I have to offer is on the website. You can become a member of my $5 a month Geopolitics and Empire to help support me, or donate, or even consult. If you want to just chat with me, you can book a consultation. And I've most of the times it's been people wanting advice on moving to Mexico. So I've had talked to people, giving them tips, like helping them out in their decision on coming down to Mexico, or just expatriating. So yeah, that's pretty much all I can think of. Yeah.
Yeah, and I believe you're on Rockfin, and you're on
all of those video platforms and social media.
Yep.
I just opened Getter. I was thinking of doing Truth Social, but I don't do like any apps on the phone, and so they only have an app that you can only do Truth Social through the smartphones. I'm like, no, thank you. And I opened up the Brighteon social. Mike Adams is Brighteon. He's got like a Brighteon social, so I just created an account there. So
yeah, well, send me any links you might want in the show description. I'll also put. I believe you're still on Twitter, right? You have Empire on Twitter and stuff like that. So I'll put all that stuff in the show description. And hopefully we do this again in the near future. And hopefully we have you on a future Union of the Unwanted. And again, if you ever need help contacting anybody that I've had some luck with, let me know. I'll be more than happy to help you network and whatnot. But I'm excited about having you on the Union of the Unwanted because, one, you'll probably see some familiar faces.
I might be a little nervous though. You have sometimes some big names in the group.
Well, you now you're experienced. You've done this for a long time. It's funny. Like I just had Dave Rubin on, and it's the first time I was actually like nervous in a long time.
Really? Because I watched that interview. It was good. I enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I was a mess. I was it was just I had so much going on. It was, again, when you have a full-time job, it's like there's so much going on behind the scenes that you try to prevent from seeping into but it's like sometimes it's like you have a rough day at work, you have all these things going on, you're thinking about like, oh, I have to go pick up the kids right after this show, can't be late or whatever, hoping that they're okay, or I got to go get groceries or whatever, like, and it's hard to just like sit down and be 100% focused. And that day was like one of those days. And then adding that with a little bit of nervousness, I'm like I wasn't on my A game, but that's gonna happen. That's just a part of doing shows. So but hopefully we have you on the Union Unwanted. The 11th, I believe, is going to be the next one. So I'll definitely put you on the guest list and have you.
Although I think you kind of do it like weekdays in the evening, no? Or how's that work?
We do it every other Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Which that's right.
When do you guys finish? When does it finish? Like, how long does it last?
Oh, well, it counts. Sometimes we've gone like 3 hours, and then there's times that it's typically 2 hours. So what I'll do, I'll throw you the guest the Zoom link, and then if you can pop in.
Yeah, but I'm doing my TNT show exactly from 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern.
10. I thought 2 hours. Okay, so it is 3 hours.
So if I ever have a day off, maybe I can jump in. So
yeah, well, one thing we do from time to time too is an international version where we try to do one earlier in the day for people who are overseas or whatnot. So we'll get you on one of those. Either way, we'll figure it out. We'll get you on. We'll definitely get you on one, and so that way you can have you on the show and also network with all the other great guests we have on there. But
have you back again on my TNT, as well as I think at some point my Geopolitics and Empire. And I don't know if we've done this before, but really get your thoughts on what's happening, the new world order, like your deep dive on that. That would be cool. So yeah. Send me schedule or whatever, and we'll definitely connect soon. And I'll send you links to this once it's up and live. Buenas noches, my friend. All right, hasta la vista. Gracias for your time, and enjoy the weekend. All right, you too. See ya.